Welcome to the next session of Facebook Live. Tonight we have with us Virat Chirania. He is a senior art of living teacher, a TedX speaker, life coach, and a multifaceted youth icon. He did his engineering from Mumbai and his master's in New York, and he worked in the corporate world for many years. Currently, he's the regional director of the youth programs in art of living and has been associated with the organization for last 13 years. We give a warm welcome to Virat. And tonight's topic is Communication Toolkit. So let's find out what we have in this for us.
Thank you, Ikta. So welcome everybody. I'm going to talk about generic communication tips, best practices, which I've kind of picked up on my journey of so many years of talking to people and traveling and doing a lot of professional speaking. So let's begin with just 4 tips that I would like to share with the audience. The first thing that I would like to share is what I call play to your strength. Right? So everybody have their own strengths and weaknesses. It's best if you put your best foot forward and play to your strength. And I have a favorite story, and the story is called David and Goliath. So maybe you guys know about this, but I'll share it nonetheless. So there's war happening, and there are these 2 armies who are fighting against each other. And they keep fighting and there's no result coming, right? So then they decide that, okay, we're going to send 1 soldier forward from one side, and he will fight with 1 soldier from that side, and whoever wins that battle wins the war. And out comes this guy who's huge. He's 6 feet tall, he's muscular, and he's the best combat warrior, and nobody's ever defeated him. He's got swords and all kinds of weapons on him. And he marches forward and calls out to the enemy that, okay, come, who's going to fight me? And nobody from the enemy is daring enough to fight this guy because it's like a suicide, right? And then nobody comes forward, and then this little boy comes, and his name is David, and he's a shepherd boy, and he has no weapons. He's wearing his shepherd clothes, and he says, okay, let me go and fight. And everybody's laughing at him that this is like walking into a suicide trap. And he asked his king, well, do you have any other option? And they said no. So he said, okay, well, might as well. And then David comes down the hill, waiting, where Goliath is waiting to fight him. And David has no swords, nothing. All he has is a sling and a stone. And Goliath feels that this is an insult, like this boy I can just right away kill. But what he misses is that David is coming down the slope and he's slinging his little string with a stone. And as he's coming down the slope, that thing is picking up pace. And Goliath is covered in armor, right? His full body, matlab, sar se leke pair tak, his entire body is covered in steel armor, except his forehead, which is visible. His eyes and his forehead is visible. And David comes and he's slinging and he's slinging. And when he's a little distance away, he aims at Goliath and slings, and the stone hits Goliath right on the forehead, and he collapses. David runs to Goliath, takes out Goliath's sword, and slits his throat. And this is basically to show you that you have a certain strength. Now, David's strength was that stone and the aim and the accuracy. And had he played the game by Goliath's rules, he would have been defeated. But he played the game by his rule, whatever his strength was. And the same happens in communication. So all of us have different strengths. Some people are naturally funny, some people have a lot of intellectual content, some people are great with a particular language, some people are great doing stuff with their audience or with the person, like processes and kinesthetic learning, would we say. Some people are naturally they speak from the heart. Some people are great at telling stories. Identify your strength when it comes to communication and use that. Play to your strength. Don't have to follow the rules that are set by others. Do what's best for you. So that's number 1. Number 2 is what I call belief, bhasha, behavior. So if you look very closely, you will see that how we communicate comes from a basic belief system. Right? So there is a belief system around the world, different communities, different countries, different age groups, different professional communities. They all operate from a basic belief system. And that belief system determines how they communicate, their bhasha, their language of expression, and their behavior. So if you look at the Western world, their whole belief system is very different from the Eastern world. Right? There's a story of Alexander coming to India, and he comes to India, and there is this guy who's naked a sadhu, and he's just looking into infinity in the sky. And Alexander asks this man, "What are you doing?" And the man says, "Well, I'm experiencing nothingness." And Alexander laughs, finds it very funny. And then the man asks Alexander, "What are you doing?" And then Alexander says, "Well, I'm conquering the world." And they both laugh out loudly. Each thinks the other is an idiot. Because Alexander feels, look, what a waste of a life. What do you mean doing nothing? Go out there, achieve. Because he grew up with a very different belief system. Right? He was told, this is one life you get. Go out there and conquer. The sadhu, the Indian sadhu, was with a very different belief system. He said, what a waste of a life. What do you mean conquering the world? What are you going to achieve? Ultimately, you're going to die. If at all you have to conquer your cravings, conquer your ego. And he grew up with a very different story. He was told, Alexander was basically told there's only one life. So the Western, the Greek mythology believes in one life. And hence their entire belief system and the way they behave. The East comes from a very different belief system, right? What are we told in India? Many lifetimes. Chill. You'll get again and again a chance. Relax, right? And hence the entire belief system. And hence our way we address, the way we communicate, right? So we have a strong power distance, right? The way we treat our elders is very different from the West. The way we work in a workplace, our relationship with our siblings, our relationship with different people from different religions, very different. And so what is good communication in the West may be horrible in the East. So context is very important. Belief system, bhasha, and hence the behavior. So this you have to keep in mind. Where am I? Who's in front of me? What's their background? What's the context here? And accordingly you need to communicate. That's number 2. Number 3 is a lot of people focus only on spoken communication, right? So the minute you say communicate, what comes to your mind is the spoken word. But a lot of research out there tells you now that a lot of what you communicate is not what you speak at all. So there are many different ways in which you can communicate. The most obvious is what I'm doing right now. I'm speaking, you can watch me, or maybe you write emails, or on the telephone, or on the internet, or whatever. Spoken, written communication. But then there's this whole body of communication called the body language, right? And there is so much that you say with your body. In fact, a lot of research says that what you say with your body is far more important than what you say with your words. And then body language gives it away. You can be saying something, but if your body doesn't match that, then people will know that it's not true. You're not genuine, right? So, in fact, nowadays when you look at interviews, they observe your body language very carefully. They see how your hands are moving. Do you have are you playing with your hands, or with your hair all the time, with your clothes all the time? Do you have a distracted body language? When you shake hands, that's so important in today's world, especially in the corporate world. When you shake hands, that gives it away. So all of that. And it doesn't stop over there. For example, there's a lot of communication which is symbolic, which is visuals. So for example, you go out there on the road and you see the lights over there, right? So there's a red and a green and an orange. That says something, right? So if there's a red light, in India, of course, it's just a polite suggestion. Said, okay, bhai, lal hai, kaide se to rukna chahiye. In the West, it's a very strict rule, but those lights mean something, right? You go to China and you can't speak Chinese, but you see a skull with 2 bones. What do you know? It's danger, right? Everybody knows that. So a lot of visual communication happens out there. And our ancestors, actually, if you look at the Indian mythology, they did a lot of this. For example, Lakshmi is on a lotus. Now, does that communicate something? It does. So if you look at lotus, the lotus keeps moving, right? It moves a little bit in water. It's not so stationary, which means that wealth will not be stationary. The communication is that wealth will come and go. That's uska swabhav wo hai. Lakshmi ka swabhav hai, right? It'll come and go. But what is Saraswati sitting on? She's sitting on a rock, which means knowledge is rock solid. Like once you know how to play a guitar, you know how to play a guitar for the rest of your life, you know how to play a guitar, right? So symbolic communication, visual communication. And then there is also communication that you do using sound, but not words, right? So for example, you go to Russia and you can't speak Russian, and you enter a room and a lot of little kids are making a lot of noise and you want them to shut up. What are you going to do? Ekta, what are you going to do? What sound will you make? Shh. That's it. Everybody gets it. Around the world, it doesn't matter what religion, upbringing, race, doesn't matter. right? This is a universal sound. You go, it's not a very good habit, but in India, a lot of people call, you're sitting in a restaurant, you want to call a waiter, you go, ch-ch. It says a lot about you. Right? It shows a lot what kind of a person you are. So you're working and your friend comes and asks you a question and you go, you didn't say anything, but you said a lot. Right? So the sound communicates very, very strongly. So it's words, written word, spoken word, it is body language, it is symbolic, visual, and it is sound. And you communicate at all these levels. So when you're communicating, make sure you understand that you're not just out there talking, it's more than that. Then that's very, very important, I feel. In fact, if you look at the Indian system, apne Vedo mein there is this concept of Chatvari Vak, which means 4 types of speech. And the 4 types are basically Para, Prashanti, Madhyama, and Vaikhari, I think. Which basically means the ultimate communication comes from consciousness, which is the language of the gods, it's in silence, and then it comes down to the level of an abstract thought, where it's not really a thought yet, but it's a vague idea. You can actually see the thought. Pashyanti means to see. And then it comes to Madhyama, where intellect comes in, and you now have framed the thought. It's a very concrete thought, but you've not expressed it yet. And finally comes Vaikhari, where you are expressing it. Right? So our ancestors, thousands of years ago, knew this entire science of how sound is formed, from Akash comes sound, and then how it is expressed. And that's a lot of non-verbal communication. And all this is very important. And then finally, there is something called a stickiness factor. And that basically means what kind of impact do you leave on your audience. Whether it is a one-on-one or a group session, what you say, does it stick to the audience? Like after a month, can they recall what you said? Right? And that depends on 2 things. One is what you say, the content itself, and second is how you say it. Right? And how you say it can change the whole impression of what they carry. So for example, 4 words. Maro mat jane do. Now where I pause, how I say this can completely change the meaning. Right? So if I'm a nice guy and I meditate, I would say, Maro mat jane do. Right? But if if I don't meditate and I'm having a bad day and I just had a fight with my girlfriend, I'd probably say, Maro mat jane do. Right? Something as simple as that. Or another example would be, pick up any random words. Okay, so pick up a sentence. When did I say you stole the file? Right? Simple. When did I say you stole the file? Now, where you emphasize on this sentence will determine how the audience will receive it, right? So if I say, when did I say you stole the file, is different than saying, when did I say you stole the file, which is different than saying, when did I say you stole the file? So you see, the whole meaning changes. It's not just about what you are saying, it's about how you are saying that, right? So I think this is more or less generic tips. So quick recap. So the first thing is play to your strength. Figure out what's your strength in communication, play to your strength. Second is understand the context, understand the belief system, and accordingly customize your content. And the third is know that it's not just the words, it's body language, it's visual, it's eye contact, it's handshakes, it's how you walk, it's your posture, how you sit, it's the sounds you make while you talk, and finally, it is how you say what you're going to say. So this is more or less generic, I feel, which can be used in any situation.
As you mentioned the 4 ways, and also from the Vedas, why is communication important in the first place?
So that's a good question. Why is it even important? I find there are a lot of communication myths out there. So, for example, I'm not doing an MBA. Why do I need to learn how to communicate? Right? Or communication skill is something you're born with. कई लोगों के पास से होता है, बाकियों के पास नहीं होता. That's how it is. Or good English is equal to good communication. Yeah. Or communication is what I say. So all these are myths. In today's day and time, you are going to work with people. No matter what profession you take, no matter what situation you are in, you're going to work with people. You will have to communicate. There is no other way. In fact, research says, and I keep quoting this all over the place, if you look at success, soft skills now determine a large chunk of whether you're going to be successful or not. More than 80% of success is attributed to soft skills, and soft skills hugely are determined by communications. I mean, communication is a very important part of soft skills, right? So whether you're going to take up a business, you're going to study science, you're going to go out there and do photography, you are going to need to communicate. Yeah, unless you're a space research rocket scientist, you're going to shut yourself in a room for the rest of your life. If that's your career, that's fine, but that's not most of us. So you will need to communicate. Your real life success will depend on it. I'm not saying you need to be a very flashy orator. You don't need to do that. But you need to understand, how do I communicate so that I can express my ideas, so that I can leverage my intellect. There is absolutely no option. That's what I feel.
So if someone walks in an interview, what tips do you have for them? How should they
look at any interview around the world, right? What's the first question you're going to be asked in an interview? I've done lots of interviews, right? What's the first question you're going to be asked?
What's your name?
What's your name?
Do?
Okay, and then? What do you do, right?
Study?
Yeah, talk about yourself. That's the first question, right? Introduce yourself. Tell us more about yourself. And that's where it starts, right? That answer is critical. That's an open-ended question. It's a question for you to maneuver the interview where you want it to go. And depending on what you're going to say in that introduction, more or less the tone of the interview will be set, right? Now, most people have never really worked on their introduction. They feel, I will just go and introduce myself. And what they do is they read out a fact sheet. I was born here, my family is this, my dad does this, I went to school here, I got this grade, I did this engineering. That's fine, that's information, that's needed. But you also need to make your introduction interesting, right? And most people don't work on their introduction. I tell you, if people watching out there, at some point you're going to give interviews, or you're in a job, or you're preparing for a job in the future, even in casual settings, you're a new member to a club, or you join some class, you will be asked to introduce yourself. And you can't just be spontaneous. I mean, I would recommend that you actually sit down and chalk out your introduction. Write your introduction down and practice it. It's one of the most important questions. And mix it. So there are two things. One is information. Second is interesting. Make it informative and interesting. Work on your introduction. Yeah. It could be in any setup. It could be trying to impress a girl. You will still need to introduce yourself in a good manner, right? So think about it, come up with an introduction, and the first time you write it down, it won't be perfect. So you need to keep visiting it again and again, iterate it again and again, and then after 4 or 5 attempts, you'll probably have a good introduction. So that sets the pace of the whole interview, your introduction, and the first thing that will happen to you. After the customary handshake and have a seat and stuff like that.
Any more tips on?
So any more tips on interviews? Don't lie in an interview. People are very smart who are interviewing you. You can exaggerate a little bit, but interview is all about bringing them to achievement statements. Interviewer will check whether you can think. Yeah? So nowadays there's no dearth of degrees. Sabke paas engineering ka degree hai. You can't differentiate yourself based on a degree. They're going to check whether you can think on the spot. So a lot of interviews nowadays are puzzle questions, right? Situation-based questions. They're going to test whether you can perform under pressure. They'll have trick questions, right? One of the most important aspects of communication is whether you have the ability to declutter your mind. If you're going to have so much garbage in your head, even if you prepare a lot and you're very intelligent, you will not be able to communicate. So communication basic prerequisite is that you are at peace, your mind is calm, there is not 2,000 thoughts in your head at that moment, and you have that ability. And what I have seen work wonders when it comes to this is meditation, right? Your breath can actually completely change the state of your mind. And most people don't use this free tool. So if you just know how to play with your breath, moments before you enter, a few seconds before you enter the interview or you go on the stage for that important presentation, if you know how to breathe and if you can declutter your mind, and it can happen in like 20 seconds. If you can do that, I think that's the best thing you can do for yourself in an interview, because a clear mind will naturally give clear thoughts and clear words. Yeah?
That's absolutely correct. So is body language also a part of communication?
Absolutely. So we spoke about how body language, so for example, shake hands. Okay, so let's do this. All right, so we shake hands. Now, this is a good angle for a handshake, right? a lot of people come too close when they shake hands, or they shake hands as if the other guy is untouchable. दूर से ऐसे हाथ मिलाते हैं, right? So you need to be comfortable here. You need to do this once, affirmation. A lot of people come when they shake hands, they come like this, which basically means I'm going to dominate you, right? I literally want an upper hand in the relationship. And in India, this happens a lot. You shake hands, and then you start a full-fledged conversation with that person, still holding the hand, and you keep julaing the hand, right? It's so funny. So you shake hands, it's supposed to last a few seconds, and then you withdraw. But sometimes people feel it's impolite to withdraw, so वो हाथ से खेलते रहते हैं और बात करते रहते हैं. So these things, a lot of people, girls, a lot of times what they do is they do finger shakes. They don't shake hands. So for a handshake, your palms need to meet. And then it's a firm handshake, right? So, thank you so much, Ekta. So this will mean a lot. Now, of course, different situations. So in India, if you're looking at women who are in positions of power, they may not want to shake hands. And that's fine. Namaste is absolutely acceptable. But in most cases in the corporate world, you will end up shaking hands. It's just a handshake, but it says a lot about you, right? So a lot of research says that people who are conducting interviews, how much time do they take to figure out whether they want to hire somebody or not? And you would feel that after a 45-minute interview, they would take time, they would discuss, but a lot of these hiring managers actually came out and said in the first 2 or 3 minutes, they make up their mind. Most cases, they say that I felt right. Now imagine, you need to do something in the first 2 or 3 minutes to make the other guy feel right about you. And a handshake is one of the first things you're going to do. So a good, nice, firm handshake, not too hard, not too soft, says a lot about you. And it's very, very important. And other signs of body language, the way you walk, eye contact. So eye contact is critical. When you're looking at somebody in the eye and talking, shows that you're confident. So it's the powerful who have the ability to look wherever they want in the room. If you're addressing a crowd, if you're powerful, confident, you'll have the ability to look wherever you want. It's the weak who avoid eye contact. And that's one of the most powerful body language cues that you can use. Looking at people in the eye, smiling, nodding. Do you know nodding is such a powerful technique? So, do you realize that if you're nodding, you cannot say no? Nodding will require a yes. So a lot of research is done on that. And if you're nodding, you will not be able to say no, because no will mean this. You will, if you're doing this, you will say a yes. So, a lot of marketing guys, if they want to get you to say a yes, they will nod. And you will end up saying a yes. So such things are there. I mean, of course, body language is not a very hard science. But it's there, it's true. And you need to know about it.
So many people have fear or stage fear, like they cannot encounter what is happening. What tips do you have for that?
So what is stage fear? Is it a fear of the stage? If there was no audience, would you still be scared of the stage? No. Stage fear is fear of people, right? And what is that fear about? If you really keep digging on root cause analysis, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? The only fear is, I will make a fool of myself. People will laugh at me, I will humiliate myself, or they will judge me, and that's the fear, right? The only way to come over public fear of stage fear or fear of public speaking is by doing it. Right? So it's like swimming, right? What's the first thing you do when you go to learn swimming? You get into the water, you start flapping around, right? You can't say, मैं किनारे पे बैठ के पहले videos देखूंगा YouTube पे और किताब पढ़ूंगा, swimming सीख लूंगा, फिर पानी में उतरूंगा. It won't work. You will have to expose yourself to that audience, speak again and again. It's okay to make mistakes. And again, it depends on the frame of your mind. Yeah? If you are calm, if you are peaceful, if you're a happy person, you will not mind if people laugh at you. And you'll learn and you'll move on. But if you're very egocentric and you give a lot of attention to what people are saying and that bothers you a lot, you can't handle the mind, then you will never do that. And again, it's one of those things which you have no option. You will have to do this. In your career, in your studies nowadays, a lot of group discussions happen, presentations happen. It's a skill that you need to acquire, and the sooner you do that, the better for you. Right? So by doing it, it's all about doing it.
So while addressing a group of people, people tend to get distracted. How do you keep the attention of people when someone is speaking or addressing them?
First of all, you need to grab people's attention. In most cases, the problem with the speakers is that they're not able to grab attention, right? So how you open your presentation, your speech, your presentation, whatever, your interview is critical. And there are a few best practices. So for example, a story is a very good way to open a talk or a presentation or a speech or blah, blah, blah. Humor is a very good way to open. An interactive question is a very good way to open. Statistics is a very good way to open, right? So when you throw a number or a statistic at people, they take notice, right? So these are good ways to grab attention. Insult is another way to grab attention. But once you've attracted them, then it becomes a question of your content. You get their attention, they're going to give you an opening balance of a couple of minutes. Chalo, 2 minutes sunte hain. And in those 2 minutes, if you don't make sense, you're going to lose them. Right? So it's then about content and how much you prepare. A lot of people feel that, oh, I'm just going to be spontaneous. Spontaneity is fine, but if you're new to this game, you will need to prepare. And there's no problem, there's nothing wrong in preparing. You go prepared, and when you do it enough number of times, then you automatically become spontaneous. And as far as distractions from the audience are concerned, what I keep doing is if I'm feeling lost, it's, again, I'm getting a lot of thoughts in my head or I'm losing it, I come back to my breath. You have to do it very subtly, right? You can't in front of everybody, but you just become aware of your breath and be with it for a few seconds and you'll get it back. Also pause. Pausing is very, very important, right? A lot of people don't understand the power of a pause, right? So when you pause, people hang on to your next word, right? They wait for what's coming next. So pausing is extremely important. Also gives you time to quickly unclog yourself and buy some time to think about what you want to say next. Gets people's attention. So don't go on there are a lot of people who speak as if there's a mad bull behind them. They go so fast, they lose people. So pause. And also voice modulation. I don't think we spoke about voice modulation. So voice modulation is another very, very important aspect of a good communicator. What can you do with your voice? You can do 3 things. You can vary your pace, volume, pitch. PVP. Typically, you will focus more on pace and volume, right? So, see, if I keep talking in the same pace and the same volume and the same pitch for any longer than this, you will probably go to sleep, right? We've all seen this in our classes, right? Bachpan mein, school mein. It's like a drone, right? So you need to keep varying that. See what radio jockeys do. They don't have a luxury of an eye contact or of any visual. So you vary your pace. Pitch is also important. So anytime you want to get people to pay attention, pause and lower your pitch. If I say, okay, now listen, people will pay attention. The minute you lower your pitch, people will pay attention, right? And you vary it up a little bit. So pace, volume, pitch. So these 3 things you can vary: pace, volume, and pitch. And that, don't do it like you're not on stage doing theater. So it should look natural. But voice modulation is very, very important. A lot of people they have great content, but they speak in such a monotonous tone that it's very boring. A lot of people feel that intellectual content has to be boring, cannot be fun. That's not true. You could be discussing hardcore physics and you can make it fun, right? You could be solving differential equations, you could make it fun, right? So it's basically your skill to make the content interesting. That's why I feel.
So talking about content, it brings me to language, which is important. And since English is so widely used, what tips do you have for someone who wants to improve their English? And
so I was born in Ajmer and I would live in Delhi, and we suddenly got transferred to Cochin in Kerala, and nobody spoke Hindi, and everybody's English was way better than mine. And it gave me a lot of complex for the first few weeks. And then I realized that iska to koi chara nahi hai yaar, ye to seekhna hi padega. And the minute I accepted the fact that I have to learn this language and I can't really keep looking for exit options, the whole thing changed. I tell you, 6 months is all you require to speak decent English. You don't have to speak Shakespeareish English, right? But decent English, no grammatical mistakes, no strong accent. That's all you need. And for that, again, you need to practice. So if you look at it, I do this a lot with people, and this is one of the most common questions I get asked. So if you look at your vocab in one day, suppose on an average you speak out 500 sentences, just on an average in one day, you will see that about 60% of what you say every day is same. Right? A lot of it is similar. Did you have food? Are you coming for dinner? What's the time? I'm running late today. I'm not feeling well. How are you doing? When is the meeting? Did you send that email? Right? That is very similar. So what you do is, here is a very simple way that works for a lot of people. I've used this. You make a list of top 300 to 400 sentences which you speak every day in your mother tongue. And then get somebody to translate that in English. Yeah? 400 sentences now in English. Mug them up. Learn them by heart. Right? And next time a situation arises where you can speak that sentence in English. This time, since you have mugged it up, you know this is the right sentence. So if you want to ask somebody, how do I reach XYZ place, you know this is right because I've learned it, and the more right English you speak, the more confident you get. And if you can speak 80% English right, 20% shoot sabko milti hai. Right? So 80% of your English needs to be right, but it's becoming again a skill which you can't do without. Yeah? I'm extremely proud of my mother tongue of Hindi, but whether we like it or not, the world is moving towards English as a global language, and that's our advantage. When I was in the US, I realized that a huge advantage Indians had over Chinese, at least 10 years ago, was our ability to speak good English. And of course, the Chinese are catching up now, but this is required. I don't think there is any shame in first accepting that I can't speak good English, but then doing something about it, right? Moving towards it. 6 months is all you need if you really want to learn a language. If you can speak Hindi, which is far more sophisticated a language than English, you can definitely learn English. Yeah?
That's great. And one last question.
Sure.
You mentioned about breathing practice and meditation. Could you tell a little bit more about it?
So I meditate every day about half an hour to 45 minutes. I do some basic yoga, some pranayams, and then I do the Sudarshan Kriya. So I learned this at the Art of Living program, which I did about 13 years ago in Bombay. I was in final year engineering student, and I was convinced I don't need to learn any of this. And my friend forced me into going for this workshop. And once I did the workshop, I realized that this was fantastic. It wasn't a pravachan. It was something which was very practical, which worked for me. And I started practicing since then, and I realized that my concentration improved leaps and bounds, and a lot of other things, a lot of positive benefits came. And since then I've been doing this, and it helps big time in not just communication, but overall well-being and overall excellence in your life. So I do this practice every day, and I would recommend that to everybody.
Thank you, Virat, for being with us tonight. And tonight's Facebook Live was powered by Ojasvita, the Power of 7 Herbs.